اهتدى بهداه أما بعد. We continue tonight, my dear brothers and sisters, with the sharh of Sahih Muslim, the book of Iman, or the book of faith, from Sahih Muslim. And we take the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, which is similar to the previous hadiths that we touched up on last week, where Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu as he was riding behind him on the donkey, and he replied back to the call, labbayka wa sa'dayk, to which Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he replied with the same reply again when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him again, and then the third time he done the same, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if anyone testifies, meaning sincerely from his heart, that La ilaha illallah Mohamad Rasulullah, then Allah will protect him from hellfire. So Mu'adh radiyallahu anhu said, should I not inform the people of this glad tidings so that they may rejoice? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said no, so that they do not rely upon it. And this is the same hadith as the ones that we covered last week, the famous hadith of Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was on the back of the animal with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the explanation of this hadith has passed. Then we have the hadith of Itban ibn Malik, who said that he came to Medina. When he came to Medina, he said, something had gone wrong with my eyesight. This man, Itban ibn Malik, he said, when I came to Medina, there was a problem with my eyesight. He said, I therefore sent a message to the Prophet Mohamad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his message to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that I desire that you kindly visit me at my house with your presence and you pray in my home. This is what Itban asked from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He asked for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to come to his house so that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can pray in Itban's house. He said, so that I can then make that a corner or a place of worship. He was intending, wherever the Prophet ﷺ prayed in his house, he wanted to turn that into his own place of worship for Allah Azza wa Jal. He said, so the Prophet ﷺ came to my house, and those amongst the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum also accompanied him. So the Prophet ﷺ answered Itban's request. He came to his house and he came with some of the Sahaba. He said he entered my house and he prayed in my house. And his companions began to talk among themselves. The Sahaba, while the Prophet ﷺ was praying, the Sahaba in Itban's house, they began to talk. They were having a conversation. And their conversation centered around the munafiqeen. They were talking about the hypocrites, the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. He said, and then the conspicuous one by the name of Malik ibn Dukhshum was made the target. they began discussing this man by the name of Malik ibn Dukhshum, accusing him of being a hypocrite, and they wished that the Prophet ﷺ would curse him and that he should die or meet a calamity. They didn't like this man by the name of Malik ibn Dukhshum because they felt that he was one of the hypocrites. So when the Prophet ﷺ finished his salah, he asked them a question. And he said, Malik ibn Dukhshum, does he not testify to La ilaha illallah and Muhammad Rasulullah? So they said, the Sahaba said to him, he does testify to that, but he does not do it out of sincere heart. He does not do it out of sincere heart. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever testifies to La ilaha illallah and Muhammad Rasulullah would not enter hellfire, and its flames would not consume him. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu then said, this hadith impressed me very much that I told my son to write it down. So this is the hadith. Imam Muslim then mentions another narration of the same hadith of Anas ibn Malik, that Itban ibn Malik told him that he became blind. In this narration, it says he became blind. The first narration said his eyesight became very weak. But in this one, it says he became blind. So he sent a message to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he should come and pray in his house, and he will mark that position as a place of worship. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, he came and his companions were there in a discussion among them about a man who was known as Malik ibn Dukhshum, and subsequently the narrator of the hadith described the same hadith stated above. Okay, so who's the owner of the house? Atban ibn Malik, the one that had a problem with his eyes. Atban ibn Malik ibn Amr Al-Ajlan Al-Khazraji Al-Ansari. He was from the Ansar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And this man, Atban, he's the one that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made brotherhood between him and Umar ibn al-Khattab. Because we know when the Sahaba from Mecca came to Medina, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam akha bayn al-Muhajirin wal-Ansar, he made brothers between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. He would get one man from the Muhajirin of Mecca and one man from the Ansar of Medina, and he would tell them, you two are brothers, to strengthen their bond. Atban was made brothers with Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And he passed away during the Khalifa of Muawiyah, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. Okay, this hadith, my brothers and sisters, there are a number of lessons that we take from it. First of all, is the man that's in discussion. Who's this man that the Sahaba were talking about? Malik ibn Dukhshum. Who the Sahaba had assumed that he's a hypocrite. Malik ibn Dukhshum, he was from the Ansar. He was from the people of Medina. Imam ibn Abd al-Barr, one of the great ulama of the Salaf, the ulama of Hadith, he said, and he mentioned that the scholars did not differ that this man, Malik ibn Dukhshum, the one that's in question, that he did not witness Badr. They all agreed that he witnessed the Battle of Badr. This man, Malik ibn Dukhshum. And he witnessed the battles after it. Ibn Abd al-Barr also said, it is incorrect to say that he is a hypocrite. Malik ibn Dukhshum, it's incorrect to say that he is a hypocrite because his actions proved that to be incorrect. He witnessed the battle of Badr and he witnessed all the battles after it. And we know one of the traits of the munafiqeen in the time of Rasulullah ﷺ was to avoid war, to avoid battle. They will do whatever they can not to fight with Rasulullah ﷺ. But this man Malik, he witnessed Badr, and that's an honor. The people of Badr are special. He witnessed Badr and he witnessed the battles after it. So Ibn Abd al-Barr rahimahullah is saying it is incorrect to say that he is a hypocrite. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah also said this hadith shows that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned his innocence from hypocrisy. Because when the Sahaba spoke about him in that way, the Prophet ﷺ did not agree with them. Rather, he mentioned to them, doesn't he say La ilaha illallah? Then he said, whoever testifies to La ilaha illallah sincerely, hellfire does not touch him. So it's like he's defending Malik. Is it not? Otherwise, he would have said to the Sahaba, yes, he's alright. He is a hypocrite. But the Prophet ﷺ did not do that. So Malik ibn Dukhshum, even though the Sahaba might have felt that towards him, it was incorrect. We also benefit from this hadith that it is permissible for the leaders and the scholars to visit their followers. Itban asked the Prophet ﷺ to visit him, and Nabi ﷺ is his leader and the leader of mankind. And the Prophet ﷺ visited his follower. This, we benefit from the hadith also. We also benefit that it is permissible to invite your elders, your scholars, and your leaders to your house. It is permissible to invite them to your home, as Itban did for the Prophet ﷺ. We also benefit that it is permissible to speak while someone is praying, as long as you do not distract him. It's permissible to speak while someone is praying, as long as you are not distracting him. Because the Sahaba were speaking while Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praying in Itban's house. We also benefit that it is permissible to wish and make dua for the destruction of hypocrites and people of misguidance. You can make this dua because the Sahaba wished that the Prophet ﷺ would make that dua towards Malik. So the people of hypocrisy, the people of innovation, the people of misguidance, those who are a danger to the ummah, it is permissible to make dua against them. We also benefit that it is permissible for the visitor to lead the prayer in the host's home by his permission. And that's the condition, it must be by his permission. If you are visiting someone in their house, always remember the owner of the house is most rightful to lead the prayer in his house, unless he gives the permission to someone else. We have authentic hadiths about this. The Prophet ﷺ said, a man is not to be led in prayer in his home. So no matter who you are, even if you're a great scholar, even if you've memorized the Quran, if you're in someone's home, he is most rightful to lead the prayer unless he gives you permission. The hadith also teaches us that the Sunnah was written in the time of the Sahaba. Because Anas ibn Malik, who's a companion, what did he say? This hadith, I loved it, so I told my son to write it. What does that teach us, my brothers? That the Sunnah was recorded in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is one of the great proofs, one of the many proofs against those who try to attack the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by claiming that the Sunnah was not compiled or written until the time of Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim after 200 years. No, we have many hadiths where the Sahaba themselves radiallahu anhum used to write. Even though their memory was great, but they would also write. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, when the companions were out, or when he was asked how he learned so much hadith about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I used to write and others did not write. Others meaning not all, but some didn't write, but I wrote. And that's also dalil that the companions, they would record the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For the Quran and the Sunnah are both preserved by Allah Azza wa Jal from the time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them down. And whoever claims that the Sunnah was only gathered 150, 200 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a liar. And he's a zindiq. He is a foul person who tries to attack Islam. But his attack is rejected. Because we have plenty of evidence to show how Allah Azza wa Jal preserved both the Quran and the Sunnah, and they were both written in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith also teaches us that it is permissible to take a musalla in your home. A musalla meaning what? A place where you pray, a designated place for salah. You know how in your home you might have a spot in your home where you prefer to pray? That's called a musalla. That's your musalla. That's your place of prayer. This is permissible because Atban told the Prophet ﷺ, pray in my house so that I can make that spot a musalla for myself. Now that shows that you can do that. There's no harm. طيب. We take another hadith, which is the hadith of Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, who narrated that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he has tasted the sweetness of Iman, the one who is content or pleased with Allah as his Lord, Islam as his religion, and with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his messenger. This hadith, Al-Abbas is saying, the person who has these three qualities has tasted the sweetness of Iman, because Iman has a sweetness. It's like a fruit. And you taste that sweetness when you are pleased with Allah as your Lord, with Islam as your religion, and with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger. Okay, who's Al-Abbas, the narrator of this hadith? Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. He was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he was only 3 years older than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was born 3 years before the year of the elephant. He was born 3 years before the year of the elephant, and we know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born on the year of the elephant. And Al-Abbas migrated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before the conquering of Mecca. And Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, during his Khalifa, he asked Al-Abbas to make dua for Allah to bring down rain. And that shows a virtue of Al-Abbas. For Umar to ask him to make dua shows that Al-Abbas radiyallahu anhu was from the noble companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was very close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he passed away the year 32 Hijri at the age of 86. He was 86 years old, and he is buried in the Baqi' radiyallahu anhu in Medina. So in this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever is pleased with Allah as his Lord. To be pleased with something is to be convinced by it and to find it sufficient and that you do not seek other than it. That's what being pleased with something means. You're convinced by it, you believe it's sufficient, and you don't seek anything besides it. That's being content and pleased with something. So the meaning of being pleased with Allah as your Lord is that one does not seek a Lord other than Allah. And he does not seek other than Allah in worship. He worships Allah Azza wa Jal alone. And to be pleased with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger is to not take an example other than him. You are content with him as your example. And you follow his way alone. That's what it means to be pleased with Muhammad as your messenger. When you are pleased with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger, it means you do not need any other example. He is your qudwa. He is your example. You follow him and no one else. And to be pleased with Islam as your religion is to follow and abide by its laws. To make halal what Islam makes halal and to make haram what Islam makes haram. To accept that without rejecting anything from it. That is the proof that you are pleased with Islam as your religion. Some of the lessons we take from this hadith is the virtue of being content, the virtue of rida. The virtue of rida. And it is from the greatest levels of worship, as the scholars say, to be content with these things. Allah as your Lord, Islam as your religion, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as your messenger. This is from the greatest levels of ubudiyya, of worship. And the hadith is also proof that belief in the heart is part of Iman. Belief in the heart is part of Iman because rida comes from the heart. To be content and pleased comes from the heart. And the Prophet ﷺ said it's the sweetness of Iman. And this refutes the Karramiyya sect who believe Iman is on the tongue only. Yeah, the Karramiyya, they say Iman is only to speak on the tongue. But here, the Prophet ﷺ linked the sweetness of Iman to being content. So that shows belief in the heart is part of Iman also, which refutes the Karramiyya and whoever follows their path. Insha'Allah, we will continue with the next following hadith in our next lesson bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Are there any questions? طيب سبحانك اللهم